nobody was talking about disparities. Nobody was talking about Black maternal health. And apparently, I was one of the first people that started talking about it because it was so clear to me that the treatment that was given to African American women was substantially different than the treatment that was given to white women. And that's across the board for all women of color.
Welcome to Coffee Break, where we invite you to walk on the path of self-discovery with us. I'm Liz, joined by my co-hosts Fatima and Grace. We're three women from different walks of life, united by our passion for purposeful living, authentic connection, and service to others. Welcome to Season 2, where we are thrilled to introduce you to guests we call disruptors, individuals who faced major turning points in their lives and weren't afraid to challenge the systems around them. They remained hopeful in the face of hardship, paved their own paths, and positively inspired others along the way. Make sure you hit the follow or subscribe button so that you're updated on our latest episodes. Enjoy today's conversation.
So today we are so blessed to be talking to Madeleine Oden. She lives out in the Northern California area. I have known her for many years. She is my best friend's husband's mother. What a crazy connection. And recently she came to where I live to be the doula for my first grandchild, with my first child having their child. So that was a very exciting experience, and it connects to one of her superpowers that she's going to talk about with us today. And I also know her as the person who, because I'm moving, came into my home and within 2 days had it super packed up. So that's another superpower that, and a blessing that Maddie has brought into my life among other blessings. She was another person who was a great and intentional support when my daughter passed away, because we have that in common. So with no further ado, I am going to introduce you to Maddie. Maddie, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you came to be?
How I came to be. I was born a very long time ago, 75 years to be exact, in New York, in Jamaica, Queens, and came to California when I was 16, actually kicking and screaming. I didn't want to go. Then went to school at UC Davis, got pregnant, had my first child at 19, 20, and never graduated, and then moved to San Diego, got married, had 2 more kids, then moved back up to the Bay Area, where I currently reside. I worked 30 years in the municipal government. I was a chief steward in the clerical union at CIU for 13 years. And in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, I was very active in the civil rights movement, the anti-apartheid movement, the anti-Vietnam movement, and a bunch of other movements. And that kind of brought me to where I am, almost.
Almost, okay. What's that almost?
So the almost is I eventually had 3 kids. I have 8 grandkids, 3 great-grandkids. And my oldest child, my daughter, was 32 in 2001 and pregnant, and her labor was induced, which she didn't want, but they did that. And 10 hours after she was induced, she passed away, and so did her daughter, my granddaughter. So as a result, eventually, about 2.5, 3 years after her transition, I started a nonprofit foundation called the Tasha Oden French Memorial Foundation that dealt with pregnancy and childbirth. Was originally an educational foundation and dealt with the disparities in maternal health, and highlighted, because I strongly believe then and now in natural birth, so it highlighted midwives and doulas and just the whole maternal mortality statistics and disparities, specifically for Black and brown women.
Thank you so much for that. I know that was a lot. And for the purpose of our audience, I'd like us to just go back and unpack a little bit. So, because this might be someone's first time hearing some of the terms that you use for, but first of all, I'd like to say I'm so sorry to hear about what you experienced with your daughter. And I know that it is a lifelong loving and grieving process when we lose our children. And I also wanted to say I commend you that you turned that loss and grieving into something that would benefit women for years to come, including my own daughter. So thank you so much. Going back to unpack, if you don't mind, can you explain to us how did getting induced lead to your daughter's transition?
Okay, well, she was induced with a drug called misoprostol or Cytotec, which actually is one of the two major ingredients in the abortion drug RU486. So it does in induction what it also does in abortion. The difference is in induction, you're looking forward to a live birth, and in abortion, you're not. It was not in 2001 and still not approved by the FDA for labor induction. However, they use it all the time. It is the standard of care to induce because it works very fast, it's very cheap, and it has a shelf life of forever. The problem is it was created for ulcers and not meant to be scored, which means cut in quarters, but that's what they do because they still can't figure out the right dosage. So they cut it in quarters, 25 milligrams per quarter. But if I get a quarter and you get a quarter, it could react differently on each of us because the drugs are not equally distributed. And so she was not dilated and her cervix wasn't thinned out. And so they gave her Cytotec. And she just went into really, really strong convulsive contractions and ended up having an amniotic fluid embolism, which is the release of tissues and debris from the uterus, the amniotic fluid coming up into her lungs, and she died of an amniotic fluid embolism. They did an emergency C-section, which of course was too late, and the baby, of course, was thrown around in the birth canal in her uterus really violently, so she died also.
Thank you so much for that. And so that it's clear that that is what inspired a part of your life journey to focus on being an advocate and a catalyst around how we look at maternal health here in America. So is that fair to say that that's when you knew that was something you were here to make a difference around?
I don't think I actually knew it then. I do distinctly remember, because you know how things are blurry in those situations, especially if you're there. I do distinctly remember walking out of the emergency room of the hospital and it was ringing, and I heard myself say, that drug is going away. Because I had asked the doctor that came to the hospital what happened, because my daughter was very healthy, baby was very healthy. And she said, well, we don't know, but it does happen. It's rare, but it happens. And I didn't understand that because I didn't know anything that I know now. And I said, okay, well, can you just tell me that you won't use it again? You just gave somebody a pill and killed 2 people, right, in 10 hours. And she looked at me and she had a pregnant pause, so to speak. And she said, no, I can't tell you that. And so after that, because I didn't understand that, I wanted to know everything about that drug, and I looked it up, and the drug company that created it for ulcers gave a whole list of things and sent a letter to over 200,000 OBGYNs saying, don't give this to pregnant women. These are all things that it does, up to and including death of the mother, death of the child. So it's still not approved by the FDA because in order to have it approved by the FDA, you have to have a large NIH study, which includes thousands and thousands of women, which means they have to know all the possible side effects that they're getting into in order to agree with it. Well, nobody, when they read those side effects, is going to say, oh, yeah, I'm going to sign up for this drug, with the possibility of me dying or my baby dying. So they just kind of keep experimenting with it. And the rate of experimentation specifically in maternal health, but also in other areas of medicine, is really unbalanced due to racism of the medical system on Black and brown women. And it has been forever. That's a historic fact in the U.S. So they basically experiment with it.
Thank you. My daughter had an emergency induction using that same drug, and she also had a C-section, her first pregnancy, and so we were not prepared for any of that, and we just followed what the doctor said, because even though we knew from you it wasn't the best choice, they weren't really offering us an alternative that would make any more sense to us. So Liz, from hearing her story and some of the work that you've done, do you feel like in your culture there's been some of the same racism, or is that something that you don't feel like you're in limited? I'm not saying you know everything in your culture or whatever, but from your experience, does this resonate at all?
I do think I see a lot of that in my community as well. And we are just kind of at the mercy of the healthcare advice that we receive, like you just said, with your experience with your daughter. So I think that's why the education piece is so important, because then at least we know the best decision we can make out of the options that we have, and advocate for something different, even if what the provider is saying is your only choice. I do feel that women of color especially, we do have certain disadvantages when being treated, and most of our providers here at least aren't people of the dominant culture anyways, so that makes it a little bit difficult as well.
And I do want, for the purposes of the audience, to know, thank you so much, Liz, what a midwife and a doula is, because you mentioned that that's one of the solutions, and that would help with education if we knew, hey, maybe we should choose a midwife, maybe we should have a doula. That could help protect women, especially when we're at our most vulnerable.
Okay, so a midwife literally means with woman, and they use, for the most part, midwives out of hospital midwives. The midwives in the hospital we call midwives. They're certified nurse midwives.
So she said med, M-E-D, a play
Yes.
on M-I-D. Okay.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. And the midwives, out of hospital midwives, home birth midwives, they use a lot of homeopathic methods, old ways. I mean, people have been giving birth since we've been on the planet, and birth has not changed, either getting pregnant or having a baby. So the methods are literally tried and true, and the maternal mortality statistics were much less a long time ago when women were having babies out of the hospital. So the midwives, they have a lot of medical background. They know a tremendous amount in terms of turning babies. Sometimes if the baby is breech, or there's twins, or the cord is wrapped around their neck, they can do these things without cutting on them in the hospital, basically due to their fear of liability, which quite frankly they should be afraid of. They defer immediately to the C-section. That's why C-section rate in the U.S. is so high, it's 38%. And midwives will try everything, changing positions, walking the woman around in terms of contractions before you even think about epidurals, which midwives don't use. They do water therapy, they do acupuncture, they do cupping, they do all kinds of stuff. And if none of that fails, or if the mom just said, I just can't do this anymore. I've been at a lot of birth centers and home births where the mom goes, I just can't do this. And the midwife can't resolve whatever the issue is. They will transport. I mean, they're not going to sit there and just make the woman give birth if it's a danger. A doula literally means servant. It's a Greek word. Doulas and midwives have been around since the beginning of time. Even with or without that label, women have come in community to help moms have babies in the village. And most importantly, really, I mean, people are focused on the birth itself, which is obviously tremendously important. And the pregnancy period. However, the postpartum period is like super important because postpartum, after the baby's born, is forever. And your body is forever changed with each birth differently. And your emotions, everything, your hormones, it's all changed. So the doula will do whatever is needed, actually. That's not medical unless the midwife isn't there. So changing different positions, having really long conversations with the mom before the birth, after the birth, sometimes during the birth, which midwives will also do, and they do a thing called centering, which is where all the women that are going to give birth around the same time come together in groups and they all discuss, what's going on. Because what's going on wherever they live, however they live, is really important and always has some effect, small or great, on the birth and the psychological, emotional, and quite frankly, physical state of the mom. So all of that is gone over with, none of which happens with OBGYNs in the hospital and the medical sense.
That is so fascinating. And when you're talking about doula, I'm just so grateful. We have to pause here again just to tell you thank you, because Maddie has come in and she's been a doula for my daughter. And she's right when she says they do anything. She's held the baby so that she could sleep. She's done laundry. She's cleaned. She's there answering all her questions through a text or on the phone, and taking care of grandma, helping me at my house. And I can barely have laundry and she's washing it. So we're very grateful to her as a family. And then you mentioned centering, and my mom is a nurse practitioner, and for years she ran a centering clinic in Alabama where when the women got pregnant, they would all come one day a week. She would do their OBGYN check. Then they would have a group discussion around any education that she wanted to share and support for them. And then once they had the baby, they joined the pediatrician group and came together. And so for that first year, they had support with their baby. So I think those are great ways to help bridge that gap that Liz was talking about around education. Yes, it is natural for women to have babies and it's natural for us to be moms, but just like anything in life, we have to understand it and learn about it and not just say, okay, I'm pregnant now, I know what to do. That just causes a lot of stress and uncertainty. And one of the words my daughter keeps saying over and over again, everything is just so confusing. She feels like there's this ton of information and ways that people think she should do things, and she just feels really confused. So, Liz, I know you work in the industry. What are your thoughts?
I think definitely I have hope because there's been so much awareness made of the issues that particularly people of color face in getting pregnant and having birth. But I think there's still a long way to go. And thankfully, there's people like you that you've gone through so many different experiences, diverse experiences, and Maddie, who is involved in the work. And so I think that's the best we can do is to make sure that that education is emphasized. And even though there are so many options, sitting with that and deciding what you feel is best for your own body, and especially because you have the responsibility of that other human inside of you. So I would hope that naturally people want to make the best decision for the baby as well. Yeah, so talking about hope, Maddie, do you see any changes that you're feeling hopeful about in this particular field, or things that you see evolving that give you encouragement?
Yes, like 23 years ago, when I got into all of this, I was told, I didn't know this then, my daughter's African American, and I was told that nobody was talking about disparities, nobody was talking about Black maternal health. And apparently, I was one of the first people that started talking about it because it was so clear to me that the treatment that was given to African American women was substantially different than the treatment that was given to white women, and that's across the board for all women of color. And so now, 20-something years later, especially in the last, I'd say, 5 years. There's been a lot of organizations, reproductive justice organizations, Black maternal health organizations that have emerged that are specifically focused on, the the maternal health disparities and the morbidity, which is even greater, those rates specifically affecting Black and brown women. And so the education has increased exponentially. So I have a lot of hope hope and pray, actually, given the upcoming election and current things going on, like, the elimination of abortions and Roe versus Wade, I pray that people will just like each one teach one kind of thing and spread the education, because the institutions are not going to do it. And I am not sure that the media coverage, whether it's TikTok or CBS, is going to do it either, because my fear is that there's going to be a big clampdown specifically on maternal health. And the U.S., I was just telling Fatima, I read an article today that says the U.S. has always been horrendous in terms of maternal health certificates, but I just read today that an article from Washington Post that a friend sent me that said that the U.S. has the worst maternal health statistics in terms of mortality and morbidity, specifically for Black and brown women. But I do have hope, because more people are having home births, more people are using midwives, more people are learning about midwives and doulas, and the support specifically in the hospital is so crucial, because with all those machines and everything, doctors, white coats, whatever, plus the attitude, especially if you go in there alone as a single mom, even with a partner and or a husband, they just kind of like overpower you. Like, in fact, one of the things they said to my daughter when she kept refusing induction was, "You don't want to go home with a dead baby, do you?" You say something like that to somebody who's in labor. Yeah. It's that fear thing.
It's the fear, yeah.
Fear mongering.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I do have hope, because so many more people are waking up to the necessity and just the incredible results where every mom is treated like a human being.
Individual human being.
Yeah. And the baby and the mom are important. In the hospital, after you have the baby, all eyes are on the baby. Nobody's looking at the mom. And quite frankly, that's a lot of reason why there's a lot of morbidity and mortality.
Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned a good thing about the increase in education is helping us to take care of our bodies in preparation even for birth and for pregnancy. And I think these days there's also more awareness around just holistic health in general, just taking care of our bodies and doing as much in our own power to put our body in the best condition it can be in. And we have a lot of power and choice in how we navigate that. So that's really great to hear. We want to ask, what is one piece of advice, maybe the best advice that you've received along your journey with this?
The best piece of advice I've given is kind of like twofold. Number one, just always be there for whatever's needed. And number two, don't take things personally, whether it's in the hospital or something a client says or whatever, which is hard a lot of times. But I think it stagnates people when they do that. They just immediately suck it up and think it's about them. When it isn't, especially when you're dealing with pregnant moms that are in labor, they say all kinds of things.
Fatima's looking like she knows that well from the recent experience.
Yes. I was in my feelings because of some of the things I was told. So, yeah. But I'm not an experienced doula, so I did take them personally. Yeah. But my doula talked to me about it and helped me. Well, talked me out of it. So, got me off the ledge. It's been so interesting hearing so much about maternal health and how you got started and hearing about your precious daughter. Is there anything else that you'd like to share that you think this audience would benefit from when it comes to maternal health?
Yeah, that there are a lot of organizations out there now that I want to give a shout out to because they're incredible. I'll start off with Common Sense Childbirth, run by Jenny Josephs in Florida, which trains midwives, which trains doulas, which has centering and postpartum care and a birth center. And their motto at Common Sense is, because they're in Florida, they're in Orlando, so there's a lot of immigrant moms there that are pregnant that don't have medical insurance that won't be seen by anybody, so they're kind of like left out there. And Jenny has always said, if they knock on the door, we serve them. And she does that 24/7 with her prenatal safe spots, which have gone all over the country. There's like over 100 of them now that deal with women during the pregnancy period. Then there's an organization that I'm personally involved with, which is Speak, Move, Change, which was formed by myself and two other women about 4 years ago. Both of the other women, Wanda Irving and Shawnee Benton Gibson, they both run their own nonprofit foundations. Shawnee runs the Area Foundation, and Wanda runs Shalon's Maternal Action Project. They were both formed because both of their daughters died in the postpartum period. And so they, like myself, were very determined that it wouldn't happen to anybody else. So we have a whole week of Black Maternal Health Week where we focused on all kinds of different issues. And now we also are doing a Postpartum Awareness Week close to Mother's Day, which is a whole week of information and contacts. Then there's the Black Birthing Justice Program, which is based in the Bay Area, Sister Song in Atlanta, and Sister Web in San Francisco. And those are just a few because there's tons that are popping up.
Thank you so much for that. And so wherever you're listening to the Coffee Break on our podcast platforms, in our drop-down section, you can find a list of all of these and the links so that you can follow them, like them, get the word out, because the more people know about these organizations, hopefully it will change the story for our daughters and granddaughters for years to come. So thank you so much for sharing that. So let's now pivot to some other things that give you joy. I know that you have a big family. I've always admired her family. I think they're just the bee's knees.
Fatima's always talking about your family.
Yes.
There's so many great things.
So tell us about, your family, your travel, all of the things that give you joy.
Okay, well, my family primarily now consists of my two sons and both their families. I have an older son, Marcus, who has an incredible wife, Natasha, and three kids, Aaron, Daniel, and Caleb. Marcus has his own engineering firm that his wife also works in. They worked it together, been a blessing and very successful. The three kids, one is currently in the last year at San Francisco State in business and playing basketball for the Gators. And his middle son, Daniel, has graduated San Francisco State and working and is around a lot, which is great. And Aaron also is the oldest. He's 27 and he's on the list for electrician in the county. He was at Amazon. I think he's still there as a supervisor. So they're all doing really well. And my younger son, Kofi, his kids, he has 4 and 1 granddaughter. And Marcus has a grandson. 2 are in Atlanta. They're all married or with significant others, and one is in DC working for Capital One, and him and his wife just graduated Howard, and she's going to go and get a second degree in, I believe, psychology. And his youngest daughter is also graduated from North Carolina A&T and is working for a very prestigious engineering firm. And she's married, and the older daughter is married and teaching at the high school that she went to in Atlanta, has one daughter, and his oldest son is working and living in Atlanta with his partners. And I just love being around all of them, especially my grandchildren and great-grandchildren, because they're just a special type of energy that when you're a parent and you're totally responsible, especially as a single parent like I was, responsible for feeding them, clothing them, keeping them safe, taking them to school, whatever, giving them the right direction in life, you're always like on it. But as a grandparent, of course you put little ideas in their head about stuff, but that's not your primary job. So you just get to enjoy them in the swings in the park, traveling. We travel a lot together. Yeah, and that's great, traveling with them, because it's a whole different mindset.
So it's such an interesting thing to hear about this generational curiosity about the world, this adventure to leave home and to be, using the new term, old term, but that's becoming trendy right now, being nomadic. So what do you think, in your estimation, what did you do as a mom to foster this, if anything, in your tribe?
Well, as a mom raising my kids, the thing that I did to foster that was we didn't go anywhere. So, that was pretty easy. I mean, if we went to San Diego once a year or twice a year, to see cousins down there, okay. But other than that, really not too many places. Some places, actually, that's not true. Some places in Northern California, maybe for a weekend. But I think just the desire, the knowledge, first of all, that there's a lot more to the world than your house and your little village, whatever city that is, and your state. And being curious about that. I mean, I think one thing that I know I gave to my kids was, just the joy of meeting new people and new cultures and new food. And we didn't do it a lot, but it was something that I always tried to lift up. So when they got to be able to do it on their own, they went out there and they did it. One kind of takes it to the extreme, and the other one also does it, but runs their own engineering company. So it's like not as free to do that.
Well, it's been so great, listening to your story. And I mean, I know her. And so this is just a sliver of what she does. It's like when I'm with her, she stayed with me for a week and her phone is constantly ding, ding, text, ring, ring, calls. So we just got a slither of her life today, and we're so grateful that she was able to take some time. But we're going to end our discussion with Dear Maddie on, what do you believe is your superpower?
Okay, well, I don't necessarily think I have a superpower, as I've told Fatima. But I guess if anything, my motto basically in life is that literally all people are created equal, and everybody needs the same thing. They need housing, they need food, they need love, they need medical care, and they need education. And whatever I can do for whoever I can do it for that fills those gaps is what I do. And I don't know what you call that, but that's just the way I roll. And it's always been that way, which probably is the reason my spirit told me to do the foundation and the things that extended out of that. And quite frankly, in terms of the doula stuff, the reason I got into that was because it was taking too long to deal with these huge organizations in the U.S. to make a difference. So I just decided to do it one-on-one, and that's what I did.
Well, thank you so much. Beautiful story, very inspirational. And thank you all for tuning in. And we will chat with you over a cup of coffee with another guest coming soon.
That's it for today. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. To learn more about today's guests and find related links and resources, visit the episode page at nexusexperience.com. You'll also find our full podcast archive and a free 10-page workbook with 4 powerful journal prompts to help you reconnect with yourself.
If you'd like to support the podcast, please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. And if you enjoyed this episode, leave a review letting us know. Sharing the show with friends is also incredibly helpful. You can find us at Inside Coffee Break on Instagram and TikTok. For updates, subscribe to our newsletter on Substack via the footer of our website at nexusexperience.com. Today's show was edited by our co-host, Grace Chung. We appreciate your love and support. See you in the next episode.